Joan Kennedy, a life of grace, struggle, and strength. Joan Kennedy, the elegant woman who married into America's most famous political dynasty and faced both its dazzling spotlight and its darkest shadows, passed away peacefully in her sleep at her Boston home. She was 89. Her life was one of contrast, beauty and pain, glamour and heartbreak, music and silence. As the first wife of Senator Edward Ted Kennedy, Joan's journey intertwined with some of the most defining moments in modern American history. Yet, behind the charm and public grace, she carried battles of her own, most notably her long struggle with alcoholism and her desire to find peace beyond the fame. A woman in the shadows of a dynasty, Virginia Joan Bennett, born in New York City on September 2, 1936, grew up in a loving, upper-middle-class home in Bronxville, New York. A bright student and gifted pianist, she attended Manhattanville College, majoring in English and minoring in music. Her elegance and poise soon made her a familiar face in New York's debutante scene and in the world of advertising. She modeled part-time, appeared in commercials, and even became the face of Revlon hairspray on television. It was during her college years that she met Joan Kennedy, who would soon introduce her to her brother Ted. The Kennedys were already a family steeped in politics and prestige. John F. Kennedy was rising fast in Washington, and Robert Kennedy was becoming one of the nation's most powerful voices. Ted and Joan's romance was swift, almost storybook-like, and they married in 1958, just a year after meeting. But what looked like a fairy tale from the outside would soon become a test of emotional endurance. Grace under fire, Joan's early years in the Kennedy family were filled with charm and expectation. Shy, soft-spoken, and deeply musical, she stood in contrast to the competitive, outspoken Kennedy. She was admired for her beauty. Even John F. Kennedy once referred to her as the dish. Yet this constant focus on her appearance slowly chipped away at her confidence. You start comparing yourself to the other Kennedy women, she once said, and somehow your confidence in yourself begins to evaporate. As the 1960s unfolded, tragedy and politics merged into the Kennedy story. John became president, only to be assassinated in 1963. Robert followed his brother into both politics and tragedy just 5 years later. Ted, urged to carry the family legacy, was thrust into relentless political and emotional pressure, and Joan was right beside him, often left to navigate the storms alone. The Chappaquiddick nightmare in 1969, while pregnant and on bed rest after previous miscarriages, Joan's life was shaken once again. Ted Kennedy was involved in the infamous Chappaquiddick car accident that killed 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne. Joan, though physically fragile, stood beside her husband through the public scandal that followed, attending Kopechne's funeral and court proceedings. Shortly after, she suffered another miscarriage, a loss she later said marked the beginning of her deep battle with alcohol. For a few months, everyone had to put on a show, she recalled. Then I just didn't care anymore. That's when I truly became an alcoholic. Behind closed doors. Over the following years, Joan's drinking became public knowledge. She was arrested several times for driving under the influence and went through rehabilitation programs repeatedly. Despite this, she never lost her sense of purpose or her love for music. In 1970, she gave a stunning piano recital with the Philadelphia Orchestra, earning standing ovations. Later, she narrated performances with the Boston Pops under Arthur Fiedler's baton and published The Joy of Classical Music in 1992, a book edited by her sister-in-law, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Though she wasn't drawn to politics, Joan found meaning in philanthropy, raising funds for charities and arts organizations across Boston. But her personal life remained turbulent. Ted Kennedy's infidelities grew more public, and the emotional distance between them widened. By the time he ran unsuccessfully for president in 1980, their marriage had effectively ended. They divorced in 1982. A battle for healing, Joan's mother died from alcoholism in 1976, a painful turning point that pushed Joan toward sobriety. She moved to Boston, attended Alcoholics Anonymous, and began rebuilding her life. She earned a master's degree in education from Lesley College in 1982, counseled other women struggling with addiction, and worked tirelessly to promote arts and cultural programs in Massachusetts. "I'm finally free," she told the Boston Globe years later. "So much of my married life was about keeping secrets and pretending I was happy. Sobriety means being honest with yourself and others." Even as she struggled with relapses, Joan continued to show remarkable resilience. In 2005, after a fall outside her home revealed the extent of her declining health, her children, Kara, Ted Jr., and Patrick, became her legal guardians to help ensure her safety and care. Family, faith, and legacy. Through all her hardships, Joan's love for her children never faltered. She was there for their triumphs and their pain, including her son, Ted Jr. His battle with bone cancer, Patrick's fight with addiction, and the heartbreaking loss of her daughter Kara in 2011. Her strength inspired her family. "She taught me how to be truthful with myself," her son Ted Jr. said. "She showed me that listening is more powerful than speaking." After Ted Kennedy's death in 2009, Joan was among those who stood quietly at his funeral, a figure of grace and endurance who had weathered decades of public scrutiny and personal loss. More than a Kennedy, Joan Kennedy was often described as fragile, but those who truly knew her rejected that label. Eunice Kennedy Shriver, her sister-in-law, once said, "If fragile means someone who can't cope, then Joan wasn't fragile. She faced real problems, but she never gave up. She kept trying to improve and overcome them. That's not fragility, that's courage. And courage is what defines Joan Kennedy's life. She may have married into a dynasty, but she built her own legacy, one of perseverance, dignity, and quiet strength. Through her music, her charitable work, and her honesty about addiction, she reminded the world that behind the grandeur of the Kennedy name was a woman who lived, loved, struggled, and rose again.
For full video, click related link below or like and subscribe this channel.